Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to welcome you to Casa America, an institution that has a 35-year track record to enforce the bonds between Europe, Latin America, and the Caribbean. Today we have a seminar that is called after the IV CELAC EU Summit in Santa Marta, outcomes achieved and goals to fulfill. This matches a tradition we have in this house to strengthen the future of relationships between Latin America, Spain, and the EU. Again, we do this together with America Foundation that shares with us our goal to promote cooperation among both regions, whom we recently welcomed 2 to 3 weeks ago, the Chancellor of Colombia, Madame Villavicencio. The fourth EU CELAC Summit in Santa Marta was much more than a diplomatic summit in a world that is suffering the weakening of the multilateral approach. Europe and Latin America cannot afford to not walk hand in hand. Beyond logistic challenges, given the appearance of certain leaders, the President of Spain was present in Santa Marta. I would like to highlight some of the results of the summit that will be analyzed here. Indeed, we reactivated the interregional dialogue at a time when mutual trust is essential. I must remind that we had celebrated this type of encounters for 8 years during the Spanish presidency of the European Council. It was a time when we renovated this fundamental framework of cooperation. Having celebrated this summit, I think we should congratulate each other for this. We have to reach agreements of our important speakers from different regions, from the private sector, from the OECD, etc. The conclusions of Santa Marta are clear. We need international cooperation, and there's no alternative to it. If Europe and Latin America want to have a voice in the new global scenario, they must have a combined voice, building tangible works that help their citizens, sharing their complementary and shared goals. This will happen again in the 30th Latin America Summit of Chiefs of State and Government that will take place in Madrid in November 2026. I would like to thank the America Foundation, their president, Ramon Jauregui, and their team for making this meeting possible, and I hope it will be for everyone's interest. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, León.
Thank you so much, Leon. Secretary of State, President for the Americas, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to welcome all of you to this encounter that we celebrate, such as CELAC, that took place in Santa Marta only a few days ago. Someone pessimistic will say that the summit wasn't important because there were notable absences or not high assistance. An optimistic person will say that what's important is to celebrate it. The pessimistic person will continue saying that there were no major agreements. The optimistic will say, well, a resolution of over 50 points got the agreement of over 58 countries of Europe and Latin America. I think beyond the topic vision of the summit, due to those who attended and those who didn't, what really matters is perspective. And I believe that perspective, as Leon said, is that we celebrated a summit that happened for the second time after a long hiatus between the relationships between Europe and Latin America. This had happened between 2015 and 2023. We'll see this when Josep Borrell arrives. Also, Javier Niño, who I would like to remind, who preceded Pelayo, with all of the European External Action Service, he was able to renovate the summit after a long hiatus. In this summit in 2023 in Brussels, Global Gateway was approved in an image that I would like to remind included Mrs. von der Leyen, also President Lula, and President Sanchez. And this Global Gateway is not something to be overlooked, but it's rather a plan, an idea, a set of projects that is going to last, I don't know if decades, but at least many years. And we need to analyze with a bigger perspective. That same perspective will allow us to say there will be a new summit in Brussels in a couple of years. We have a relation with the latest pro tempore presidency of CELAC that will be Uruguay for this term. I will insist that going over some specific visions regarding Santa Marta, what matters is perspective. Europe and Latin America seem decided to establish, to renovate, to strengthen a relationship in which we sincerely believe. I would like to add in this introduction. Later, it will be done by the Secretary of State, Susana Sumuelzo. Later, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Madame Villavicencio, and then Pelayo as Director for the Americas will give us an introduction to the seminar for this evening. I would like to present a couple actions that have happened in the last 2 days. First, something I think we all shared, the idea that Latin America is more submitted than ever to the changes in North American politics, rather. I think we can say this. Obviously, the history regarding the Monroe Doctrine has highlighted very important political issues that are well known. The submission of the subjection of certain Latin American presidents to Trump is terrible. We've seen inhuman images of the expulsion of immigrants chained in their hands and their knees to be expelled back to their countries in planes. This crazy idea to change the name of the Gulf of Mexico. Same thing happens with the tariffs towards friendly countries, which I prize or I'm interested to lower inflation. I will lower the tariffs. There where I have no ideological coincidences, I will punish them. This pointed out of favorite candidates in elections of sovereign countries of Latin America. Can we say this to each other? I believe we can. I don't think we're offending anyone, but I sincerely believe that Latin America has never been so submitted, so subject to the arbitrary decisions of the United States. But at the same time, as Europeans, we're living in dark times. I just remember a movie of Churchill regarding the decisive moment that he lived in the midst of the Second World War. And I remember something that Juncker used to say, the former president of the European Commission, who preceded the current von der Leyen. Back in 2016, in the debate of the State of Europe, back in 2016, he said that Europe was living an existential crisis. And I wonder whether what we're living now is not even more existential than what we went through back in 2016 after Brexit, the Crimea invasion, the financial crisis. What is happening now is even worse. We don't say this, but we are at war. We have war really close by. Putin has declared war. and their advisors say that they're at war with Europe, even if we don't name it as such. But threats are not only because of wars, they are strategic, economic, in each and every area. And Europe has an important and urgent need to respond to those threats, same as Latin America has. And this is more or less the convergence between needs and opportunities, where we believe this debate should take place. What I pretend is to establish a landing area where this will that is both Latin American and European, that must be done on the basis of the current circumstances. We have an urgent need to be together, to be more, to be stronger, because alone we don't amount to almost anything. Only if we are together, if we are able to establish political and strategic alliances, then Europe and Latin America will be able to defend the world we believe in, the values, the interests that we share. That's why this dark age that we're living through, and that we can say this to each other because it's happening right before our eyes. Maybe I'm being a bit crude when saying things in such a new way, but I don't think I'm discovering anything to any of you. We're in such a difficult moment. The conclusion is that need and opportunity have to provoke a reaction so that we can become more stronger to defend ourselves, to ensure our own future. And with this, I will be done to translate this idea that might seem obtuse of the conclusion of the needs. I'm going to establish a specific case that we've been talking about during the last couple of days. I talked about this with Pelayo a couple minutes ago. Let's bring something specific to the table regarding this convergence of needs and opportunities. The Mercosur agreement. This is up in the air. Can we say this to each other? Yes, we can, because next week we will know whether this goes forward or not. If it doesn't, if Europe is not capable of passing Mercosur, the loss of international credibility is huge. It's a full-blown drama for the European Union. It is what it is. I cannot say it in any other way because it's this evident. It's like a brutal loss of credit, of reputation in the face of the whole world. If we're not capable of leveraging this moment that Europe and Latin America is going through to prove to the world that we want to go hand in hand, that we're going to reach an agreement, that we're going to have this regulated commerce trading framework from a place of mutual respect and not from the coercion of one over the other. If we're not able to do this, then Europe will be nothing. This is the case. Forgive me for this dramatic proposal I have said before you, but the truth is that we've brought this to the table. We're going to know about this next week, more or less. But it's not only Mercosur. It's global gateway. It's a framework of relations to be built. That's why we want to leverage this afternoon, to talk about the Santa Marta Summit and to establish which are working lines in the future. The Secretary of State, Susana Sumelzo, who is substituting for the minister. Then the Colombian minister will talk, and Pelayo Castro will conclude. Thank you, Susana. You have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much. First, I would like to say that it's really complicated to follow Ramon. President Ramon Jauregui, because his dialectic is wonderful and it makes you think, which invites to have a debate and not to listen to the rest of us who have to speak. I will try to follow the thread of what you've told us, as always, to the point. And I would like to share with all of you that it's a huge honor and pleasure to participate in an activity organized by the Euro-America Foundation. As the President said, I'm intervening on behalf of Minister Alvarez because due to agenda issues of scheduling conflicts, he hasn't been able to be here with us today, and I would like on his behalf to thank you and to thank the implication of the Euro-America Foundation because of how active they are. They celebrate initiatives such as the one that brings us all together here. It allows us to move forward as a country in this interregional relationship, to exchange ideas, to value, as the President invited us, to where we are at, because that's important. It's part of what Ramon said. What we have achieved with this EU CELAC Summit, and to evaluate the steps that we're going to take to strengthen the strategic alliance between Latin America and Europe. At Santa Marta, I believe that it was clear that this regional association is based, as Ramon said, in values and interests are shared, as Ramon said, and with a vision towards the future of democratic, free, equitative societies that we all shared. We could see a closer relationship between both regions, which is key to promote an international order based on the rule of law and a coordination strengthened at multinational forums. Therefore, I will be positive regarding what Ramon said. I believe this EU CELAC Summit is a great starting point. That's our vision at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In this context that you, Ramon, mentioned, this escalating international conflict, the loss of trust in the multilateral system, and the uprising of new nodes of power is defining a new worldwide landscape. Therefore, traditional alliances are disappearing in the face of huge international threats we haven't named, but probably will appear here: organized crime, climate change. All of this make even more urgent the search for shared opportunities and solutions, something that was done at the EU CELAC Summit. And in this constantly changing world, we have the opportunity to choose which partners we want to have, to identify who we want to work with, so that those shared solutions that we have to give to issues are good to provide an answer to the challenges that we face, but also to strengthen our vision on how the international society should work. The defense of multilateralism, we will insist on this from our ministry and from the government each and every time that it's needed to. And the dialogue, these have to be the ways to reach these goals. These are key goals for those of us who make up this community. Spain is firmly convinced that within this context, the European Union, Latin America, and the Caribbean can and should be as close as ever, because both regions share values, goals, as the President mentioned, but also areas of work that provide huge benefits on both sides of the Atlantic. The dense network of trade agreements is a clear example of how these values can go hand in hand and can offer tangible results. Next week, we'll see what happens with Mercosur. Each time these trade frameworks have been defined that allow us to promote a fair trade, also the creation of decent work to move forward jointly in sustainable growth in this international context highlighted by protectionism. The agreements with Chile and Mexico, the Mercosur agreements, are a unique opportunity to move forward in our economical and geopolitical interests. and together. We must believe this firmly. These are data that we always write down because are quite sovereign. Together, Europe and Latin America make up 14% of the global population, 21% of GDP, and a third of the members of the UN. That gives us in a specific way international governance, and we have to take this into account. 58 out of the 60 countries that make up the Interregional Alliance were present at the summit, so we need to be positive. We cannot deny that the representation at the level of chiefs of state or government went down compared to the previous summit that took place in 2023. But it's also true that in Santa Marta there was a huge presence of vice presidents and chancellors, proving the political interest that we referred to. Beyond that, I would like to highlight that the priority, Spain and Portugal were the only two European countries that had representation that were represented by their chiefs of state. There you can see the importance that this country and our neighboring country, Portugal, give to the Interregional Alliance. For us, it's important as countries to focus on a specific result of this summit. In spite of all the complexity of the negotiations, we need to highlight, and proudly our colleague will do so, these magnificent results, forgive me for the redundancy, says the speaker, that came out of the summit. I don't know, we also need to acknowledge the wonderful work done by the pro-tempore Colombian representation for one reason. They facilitated dialogue and conversations, and they also had a strong will that both regions need to move forward in a pragmatic manner, especially in these times. We need to be pragmatic, and we also need to think that this is what allows us to reach conclusions and results with a high relevance. We managed to adopt a joint statement with huge commitments that create a series of topics that are key for each and every one of our members. And we also need to say that only two countries dissociated from this, Nicaragua, that already did this in 2023, and Venezuela. And they did so for a very specific point, which was a paragraph that was linked to the Russian aggression against Ukraine. For that reason, and for that reason only. With this joint statement, we send out a strong message to the world, showing that we not only share a compatible vision, but rather that we also have the will to choose each other, to adapt, to reach agreements, and to have a shared position towards the rest of the world. This is key for all the members, and we have reached several fundamental agreements. First, the defense of a multilateral system based on rules. This was said before by the President. We're at a different point right now. The respect towards human rights and fundamental liberties and fundamental freedoms, our commitment to work jointly to enforce the international system, to strengthen it, especially highlighting the UN system, the commitments that were reached regarding funding for development in Seville, the implementation of the 2030 Agenda, the promotion of this multilateral system of trade based on rules, joint work to move forward in this triple transition, digital, green, and social. And what's very important as well, the promotion to reach other relevant agreements on other fields that will allow us to deepen our collaboration in specific aspects such as citizen safety. There was a bi-regional agreement between Europe and LAC that has been signed by 27 EU members and several countries of Latin America and the Caribbean. And this shows our intention to fight criminality through the exchange of ideas and the respect towards the state of law and human rights.
Secondly, we would like to highlight the CARE agreement with an important gender approach, with 16 countries from the region in addition to the European countries. This pact has to do with immigrants that come and take care of European citizens. Thirdly, we managed to make some progress, and people who are more legitimate to address this will talk about it later, but we managed to move the global weight forward, so important for our trade and our joint commitments. I certainly would like to highlight two financial commitments. They are both historic, and they were put forward in Santa Marta. The entities that made it possible are here with us today. They amount for more than $31 billion mobilized in more than 100 projects through their investment portfolio that includes clean energy connectivity, digital satellite technology that will connect Europe and Latin America. The European Investment Bank confirmed $1 billion to improve electric grids in Latin America. They're here with us today. We also have Alicia Montalvo from CAF. That was a very important announcement. Their announcement of $40 billion for the green agenda in the region. I won't get into more details, but I would like to say that with this final statement, Spain considers that we send a message to the international community, that we were able to send this message to our societies because it has to do with how important and how beneficial it is to work jointly. We have even shown that in a very complex international context, Latin America and Europe can lead the sustainability agenda together. In addition to the agenda of digitalization and social cohesion, how offering very specific solutions for our citizens and sending a very clear message. Bi-regional cooperation is part of the response to global challenges. Now, to conclude and not to be excessively optimistic, we are talking about important agreements, but they are nothing but a starting point. I said it at the beginning, the starting point was the Santa Marta Summit. And this starting point needs our decided drive to produce real results. Therefore, we need to keep supporting this bi-regional partnership under the guidance of the roadmap that is being designed, having the summit of Brussels in 2027 as a target. And this means that we need to keep choosing ourselves as partners, that we need to support all the agreements we've reached. It also demands high responsibilities from all the countries, but also from the institutions and entities like the one that is convening us today here, who works decidedly to reinforce those links. From our ministry, I want to thank you for listening. And I would like to say that since Mr. Borrell reactivated this big bi-regional agreement, a lot of progress has been made, and we need to keep working, and we need to keep promoting and boosting development together. Thank you very much.
Creo que tenemos un vídeo con la
We have Minister Villavicencio who sent a video.
Agradezco a la Fundación Euroamérica por la invitación a participar en este seminario internacional de alto nivel, un espacio fundamental para reflexionar sobre el presente y el futuro de las relaciones entre la Unión Europea y América Latina. Es un honor para mí intervenir en este escenario que promueve el diálogo y la cooperación birregional. Durante la presidencia pro tempore de la CELAC, Colombia asumió un liderazgo diplomático decisivo al facilitar exitosamente la cuarta cumbre CELAC-Unión Europea en Santa Marta, un hito que consolidó la agenda birregional mediante la adopción de 3 instrumentos políticos esenciales: la Declaración de Santa Marta, que reafirma los principios y objetivos comunes. El Pacto Birregional por los Cuidados, con la adhesión de toda la Unión Europea y 16 países de América Latina y el Caribe. La Alianza Unión Europea-LAC para la Seguridad Ciudadana, respaldada por 18 países, que fortalecen la cooperación en un ámbito crucial para nuestras sociedades. Estos resultados reflejan una visión compartida y una voluntad política firme para avanzar en temas estratégicos. La cumbre evidenció consensos robustos en torno a la triple transición, la energética, digital y la ambiental, pilares para un desarrollo sostenible e inclusive. Permítanme destacar algunos logros concretos. En materia de acción climática, las 60 naciones participantes expresaron una convergencia total en la lucha contra el cambio climático, apoyando unánimemente la realización de la COP30 en Belém do Pará, Brasil, y comprometiéndose con reducciones rápidas y sostenidas de emisiones, en línea con la meta de 1,5 grados centígrados. En transformación productiva y digital se consolidó el consenso sobre la estrategia global Gateway, que impulsa la interconexión eléctrica regional y la transición hacia economías verdes. Asimismo, se reafirmó el compromiso con una inteligencia artificial segura y confiable, fortaleciendo la Alianza Digital Unión Europea-LAC. Se ratificaron los compromisos de la Declaración Ministerial CELAC Unión Europea y la nueva Agenda de Cooperación en Investigación e Innovación, suscrita el 29 de septiembre de 2025 para impulsar temas de ciencia, tecnología e innovación. La cumbre marcó un precedente histórico al abrir espacios inéditos de participación. Por primera vez, representantes de la sociedad civil, la red parlamentaria Eurolat y bancos de desarrollo como la CAF y el BEI intervinieron en la sesión plenaria. Este hecho refleja el compromiso del gobierno del cambio con una diplomacia más inclusiva y representativa. El Foro de la Sociedad Civil, América Latina, Caribe, Unión Europea, se consolidó como el encuentro más amplio e incluyente en la historia del diálogo birregional, con más de 200 delegados presenciales y 1.500 virtuales. Su declaración conjunta redefine el desarrollo más allá del Producto Interno Bruto y establece un mecanismo permanente de participación ciudadana, fortaleciendo la legitimidad democrática del relacionamiento CELAC-Unión Europea. Asimismo, el Foro Empresarial América Latina, Caribe, Unión Europea demostró el potencial de la cooperación económica al reunir a 327 empresas de 34 países en sectores estratégicos como energías renovables, tecnología y transporte. Todos estos encuentros generaron oportunidades concretas de inversión bajo la estrategia global Gateway, impulsando la transición verde, la transformación digital y la resiliencia en salud. La cumbre concluyó con una declaración política y una hoja de ruta clara que establece acciones concretas en comercio, en clima, energía, seguridad alimentaria, salud, educación, investigación y cultura. Entre los resultados más tangibles destacan el compromiso del Banco Europeo de Inversión de destinar 1,15 billones a proyectos energéticos en Centroamérica, incluyendo a Colombia. La consolidación de la Alianza Digital Unión Europea-LAC bajo Global Gateway. El posicionamiento del binomio CELAC-Unión Europea como bloque incluyente. Las inversiones verdes más allá de declaraciones políticas. La cumbre en Santa Marta reafirmó la voluntad de los países de ambas regiones por encontrar compromisos comunes frente a los grandes desafíos, con la conciencia de poner por encima de todo el bienestar de nuestras poblaciones con nuestras acciones. La implementación de los compromisos alcanzados en la cumbre será el eje de la acción de la presidencia pro tempore de Colombia hasta que concluya su mandato y se entregue la presidencia al siguiente país, Uruguay. Velar por el logro de lo alcanzado es un compromiso de acción presente para impulsar en conjunto un futuro mejor. Por otra parte, la visita del presidente Gustavo Petro a Bruselas y su participación en el segundo foro Global Gateway, previo a la cumbre en octubre de 2025, reafirmaron el carácter estratégico de las relaciones con la Unión Europea y su papel como socio clave en la promoción de inversiones sostenibles en áreas prioritarias de interés común. Frente a los grandes desafíos globales, renovamos la voluntad de profundizar nuestras relaciones birregionales para construir un orden internacional más justo, equitativo y democrático. Estamos seguros de que la consolidación de la hoja de ruta y la implementación de la Global Gateway contribuirán de manera significativa a este propósito. Finalmente, quisiera resaltar la relevancia de los espacios como este seminario para proyectar el futuro con reflexiones sobre las visiones existentes desde múltiples miradas. Estamos seguros de que las intervenciones de todos los participantes contribuirán con sus valiosos aportes hacia ese noble propósito. Muchas gracias.
Pelayo Castro, director para la SAC.
Pelayo Castro, Director of the EEAS. Thank you very much, Ramon, and thank you, Susana. You very well expressed it already. It is very difficult to speak after Ramon, or to come after you and to come after Minister Villavicencio. And since you already said everything, I had prepared a magnificent speech that I had been preparing for 2 days, and I had to transform it to this. But before I proceed, I would like to salute the Euro-America Foundation, Ramon, because it is a pleasure to collaborate with you. Also, I want to thank Leon for having us here in Casa de America. It is also great to see this audience full of friends, ambassadors. I see an ambassador who is my former boss, but who is also a friend of mine, so I would try to do good. Ramon, I will now try and do 3 things. First, I will speak about the context like you did. Then I will speak about the summit itself. I was in charge of being the negotiator from the European Union. I was leading all the work regarding the statements in Santa Marta. And finally, I would like to finish with 2 or 3 comments that are forward-looking. First, the context. It's been said that the context was hell, really, to organize a summit of this nature. Increasing polarization, fragmentation, international tensions, the situation in the Caribbean, domestic tensions, some pre-electoral countries that are key to the region. In Brussels, we said that this was a perfect storm in a certain way. And as the perfect storm was brewing, Hurricane Melissa came about. And it wreaked havoc, as you saw, a week before the summit. The situation was quite a challenge, I'm not gonna lie. But what I would like to highlight is that in that context, the European Union, unlike others, decided to go ahead with the summit. It invested its political capital, it assumed the risk, because in the strategic calculations, despite difficulties, it was important to move on. And I think that is the most important political signal that we send not only as the EU to our partners in Latin America and the Caribbean, but it's a signal that can be heard elsewhere. That is what I can say about the context leading to the summit. And like Ramon said, we would have liked to have greater high-level participation. It is positive to recognize it. But at the same time, I want to say that Brussels' muscle was well represented. The President Antonio Costa was there. The High Representative was there, who in turn was replacing the Commission's President. The Commissioner Teresa Rivera, Commissioner Brunner, and Commissioner Lavip. So I think that that Brussels' commitment was very much shown and present in Santa Marta. Now, speaking about context, we all need to accept that we will no longer see easy context, and that's what we diplomats are paid for. So this is the new normal. We will no longer have summits in idyllic contexts, or well, maybe with Canada or with partners like that. But in turn, this is what makes this summit more important and necessary, not less. My reflections on the context come from Brussels. And I think we need to keep in mind that we just had a year of the new von der Leyen Commission with a new institutional cycle in Brussels. It seems that a whole decade has gone by, but it's only been a year. And what's normal for someone older like myself in Brussels is that in a political cycle, Latin America and the Caribbean become a priority at the end of the term. And now that nobody is hearing us, I can explain it in the following way. Presidents and commissioners start out with a very difficult European domestic agenda, and as soon as they start saving some time, they open up to the world, and they start with the vicinity with very important partners. And when they see how difficult it is to move their agenda forward, they discover with lots of interest that there are other close partners that are well aligned, with whom it is easy to reach results. And that is when they step on the gas and they start working more with Latin America and the Caribbean. That is the normal political cycle in Brussels, but this time it was different. Looking back at this year, Latin America and the Caribbean have been in the strategic radar from day one. An example is the summit, of course, but there was the CELAC Ministerial in New York. There was another ministerial meeting about science and research, or about the new agreement with Central America that finally came into force, or the first Council of Association with the new modernized agreement with Chile, or the first visit of the Commission to the Caribbean invited by the CARICOM Summit. And the list goes on. This is to say that in 1 year we've had a record number of high-level visits and contacts compared with the past. So I also want to put that on the table. Now, the summit itself. This was an important political message at a time when it was highly needed. I was present in the whole summit, and like it's been said, political dialogue was very important. And as you can imagine, and you won't be surprised, what was at the forefront of the discussions was citizen safety and organized crime. That was a top priority from north to south, east and west. The situation in the Caribbean, multilateralism, and the reform of global multilateralism. I will go back to the Global Gateway Agenda, the green transition, digital transition, climate change, Ukraine, Gaza, those were at the forefront. This was a summit that bore fruit. If someone had told me the results we were going to have a year ago, or 6 months ago, or a month ago even, I would have signed with blind eyes, no doubts. I think that this joint statement that was signed is more than reasonably ambitious, and it has the political virtue of not renouncing to address any difficult subjects. They are all there. They were negotiated with difficulty, but Ukraine is there, Gaza is there, the situation in the Caribbean is there, and the consideration of that region as a region of peace. All of that is contained in the statement. But in addition to that statement, we managed to negotiate 2 additional and complementary declarations. I think they are very valuable. They offer a political umbrella and a political mandate from political leaders to all of us to work more and better in terms of public safety and organized crime. And there is a pact for care, because actually a debt that we had from the summit of 2023 is that we couldn't provide all the social content that we would have liked to achieve. I think that was an outstanding debt. And I think that in this case, the Pact of Care, in terms of its orientation or of women's rights, but even going beyond, is actually given a response that is very much in line with the aspirations of both regions. This declaration is a pioneer. There is nothing similar between any 2 other regions. And this is the result of multilateral work in New York, in CEPAL, and we have reached consensus between both regions. A lot has been said about Global Gateway, and Felix is here, so I'm not going to delve too deeply in that because Felix will be in charge of that. But I think that what happened this year with Global Gateway, if I may, Ramon, is that this was the year of takeoff. What we're trying to do with Global Gateway is not to finance investments. It is choosing the investments that we have to finance and the ones in which taxpayers will see themselves when public money is being put down. I think that's very different. So this was a takeoff, and it was a successful one. So Global Gateway is not about bilateral priorities. So I'm going to do this with Colombia, with Ecuador, with Barbados. I think we are the only ones doing this in the region as a partner. The only ones. Only the EU does this. And we try to connect the dots in the language of Cervantes. This is why we worked on energy and electric infrastructure. From a certain perspective, it could be like the predecessor of the EU. It is the bottom-up work that has to be done to integrate a region that is not that integrated. The digital work, supercomputing, satellites, or cables is also a way to connect. And then sargassum is also a Caribbean priority. I think this was very well reflected as priorities for the summit. In addition, the EIB announced record commitments in the history of the EIB in Latin America. This year they amount to 3 billion euros. 3 billion euros. That's a record. Something else that hasn't been done, and it's also very important, is that we managed to organize a meeting of leaders between the Caribbean and the European Union that is becoming an institutional tradition led by President Costa and the High Representative. This was very important. It was highly valued by our Caribbean partners. Another very positive result, perhaps more administrative or institutional, but that is very valuable to me, is that we started to work more and better with the CELAC Troika. That has been very difficult from both sides. I want to thank the Minister Villavicencio, her ambassador, and all the team from the Colombian Foreign Affairs Minister, because we have been working with them for many months to bring about this summit. But I think that Colombia's presidency has been very good at bringing together Jamaica, Uruguay, Honduras as members of the extended Troika. That is helping us to overcome the institutional fragility of CELAC. This is a seed that we have planted in the process, and it will be very helpful in the future. I will conclude, Ramon, looking into the future. First of all, I would like to highlight something that both Susana and Ramon mentioned, and I think it's important to repeat it. The EU's agenda for Latin America, unlike others, is substantially positive. For us, Latin America and the Caribbean are part of the solution and not part of the problem. This is a very different approach than the one other actors are adopting. It's qualitatively different, and I think this should guide our strategic radar in the future. We are not in Latin America and the Caribbean against someone. This is not an agenda against anyone. This is an agenda for the value that we give to that region. For that reason, looking to the future, we left this summit with homework, and one of the challenges before the next ministerial is that we have already started negotiations. They are well underway, but we have to adopt a more operational roadmap that translate political commitments into concrete actions. Secondly, in these very complicated moments for international diplomacy, it's important not to confuse cycle with trend. And I'm saying this because I think we're living through a very difficult cycle with very difficult pressures in the region that Ramon referred to. Those pressures make it very complicated to act internationally for some of our counterparts. We will see cycles of great difficulties, and like I said before, this is a new normal. But it would take a step back, and that's what I do in Brussels. I know that the vision from Madrid is a little bit different, but the trend is that Latin America and the Caribbean remain a strategic partner for the EU. We managed to have the second summit in 2 years. I mean, for all of you pessimists, I would say, let's not confuse a difficult cycle with a particularly difficult moment, because what's important is the trend.
3. Liderazgo de España. Estoy en Madrid.
Spain's leadership. I'm in Madrid, I work from Brussels, otherwise I cannot skip acknowledging the importance, Susana, of the leadership and the powerful diplomatic cultural effort of Spain in its region. This is a main asset of the European Union. But what I wanted to say is that muscle is being exercised directly, and that's very important, and we need to leverage that. But also, and that's very important indirectly, is that we generate traction so that we can make the region a strategic priority not only for the usual suspects, but for the remainder of the EU, and to establish a balance within Europe to look towards this region. Spain is on the back of all of this, playing an important role to generate this consensus. I would like to finish, as Susana and Ramon said, the summits are not a goal in themselves. The diplomacy during the summit sometimes turns out better, sometimes worse. But at the level of Europe, we are not going to put all of our eggs in this regional basket. If you were to ask me, well, the eggs need to be put in the bilateral basket, because it's through strong bilateral relations that we're going to be able to establish strong bilateral relations. So I believe we shouldn't be overly led by this agenda, because sometimes the best way to deal with it is to work at three levels: bilateral, regional, and sub-regional. That's the way we look at it from Brussels. And that leads me to say that after this summit, after so many efforts, we're at the moment of truth. To me, and now that no one can hear me in Brussels, to me that means what's going to happen with Mercosur. And I believe, Ramon, you're very right in saying so. If there's been a week during which at the international level Europe was summoned to take up on its collective responsibility as a global pole, that goes through Mercosur. And I dare say even more, beyond the war in Ukraine and the commitment that us Europeans can prove to, in the face of an existential threat. The key geopolitical decision of this term is that is going to be taken next week. So we have a lot of work ahead. I've already put it on my letter to Santa Claus. As you, Ramon, said, this is key for us to move forward on our agenda. And after Mercosur, we'll get to Mexico, because we need to put a date for the summit with Mexico to sign the agreement for modernization. If we sign that agreement, by the way, 98% of the GDP of the LAC region will be framed in economical and political agreements of the new generation with the European Union. There's nothing that can compare to that in other regions in the world. That will bring us to a next dimension as partners, and it will open up a whole new agenda for our regions that I'm sure we will all be able to benefit from. Thank you.
Ah, sí, sí, lo pasáis, sí, porque tenéis aquí. A ver, ¿quién tiene micrófono tienes tú?
No, no.
Yo creo que no.
Ah, sí, ellas no. Ah, Beatriz no tiene. ¿Tienes un micro por ahí?
Buenas tardes.
Necesitas un micro.
No.
I believe everything is working properly. Good afternoon. We're going to begin with our first session. We've seen the context that was presented to us during the opening session, of which were the circumstances that surrounded this summit. Both Ramon and Pelayo talk about the positive, the negative. I always enjoy saying that someone who's optimistic expects the wine to change, the pessimistic complains about the wind, and the realistic one changes the sails. Pelayo remembered that the mechanism of summits generates certain tiredness. Some put the accent on the preparation, but us, as the America Foundation, we want to highlight the opportunities for our countries, which is the one who try to strengthen the links with Latin America. Today, we have highly authorized speakers, all of whom have participated at the Santa Marta Summit. The name of this session is Opportunities for Businesses on Both Sides, Investment in Strategic Sectors, and the EU CELAC Global Gateway Investment Agenda. We're going to see this in two stages. First, we'll talk about sustainability, the connection through networks for electricity networks. The day after, Pelayo, the European Commission, just passed yesterday the investment for the highways of connectivity for an amount of 1,200 million. Probably Beatriz Corredor will be able to give us an early original approximation. It's quite early still, but I'm going to try to correct my terrible habits and my tendency to verbal incontinency because we're short on time, and I'm going to give the floor to the members of our round table. Later, we have a conversation, Ramon and I, together with Josep Borrell, to talk about this context of EU-LAC relations. I will first like to address Felix Fernandez Shaw. You had very active presence at the Brussels summit on the aspects related to the global gateway as director responsible for the relations with Latin America and the Caribbean. You had a very important presence in the declaration as well in Santa Marta. Could you establish a balance of how the evolution of this highly interesting project that you launched from the Brussels summit up to Santa Marta? I will insist that we have two parts in this first session, so I will beg to all the speakers to not overextend their allotted time, which is 4 minutes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Nacho. Thank you to the Casa America, Leon, and the Secretary of State and the Ibero-America Foundation for being here, and all of the team that has accompanied us through the 2.5 years on the arduous sale of this. The goal is to bring all of this speech, all of this discourse that we believe is real, that we experiment from Brussels, but in the region needs to become grounded. What we did when Ramon and Nacho talked to us a few months ago to make an event to see what happened in the summit, and Pelayo and I were shaking, but the result is that we did have a summit, and I'm going to try and focus together with Beatriz, who was there, with Alicia, with Maria, with the European Investment Bank, that beyond who was there, who wasn't, who said we had to be, who said we didn't have to be, a bunch of us were there working as lions and pushing forward to achieve things, to do things that maybe didn't have the proper repercussion. I think it's been 40 years that Spain had a huge role in creating the only integrated regional electrical system, which is the Central American, and now with the initiative of electric interconnections where companies such as Enel, Italy, Cobra, etc. What we're going to do, what has been done by the European Investment Bank, is to provide a huge amount of funding for Central America, another investment bank with CAF, ECIB, with CAF-WV, with COFIDIS, amongst others, want to try and to manage and to promote in the region. Because of their request, I would like to thank here Colombia as minister that made everything possible to have this been an initiative to be launched in the summit from the first day. America needs to have a proper functioning electrical world. Otherwise, the current electrical system won't be enough for everything that needs to be done and everything that they want to achieve. So there's a huge risk of recarbonizing, and here we have to look into it. With those 1,000 millions from the Europe, with this 1 billion of the European Investment Bank, we had an agenda of projects of over 700 millions. Other more basic things. We have Stormwatch. Stormwatch is to help the Caribbean to improve their meteorological forecast. If they're not able to forecast, the whole country will go down. The weather forecast. Every year with the hurricanes, this is an issue. What happened? Well, someone who had helped them until now cut down funding and they're blindsided. So the European Commission and 4 weather agencies in Europe have brought together to provide digital data using of the data produced by Copernicus to be able to forecast and access all the data to allow them to stormwatch. Seems a very basic thing, but when we say that we all work at the same time and the common interest, that's where Europe needs to be, and that's where Europe was. And the Caribbean said, there's Europe. We either think about the Sargasso. Well, the Sargasso is here once a year, every year. It becomes worse each year, and we don't know what to do with it. Well, there is Europe investing with their companies in technological solutions to allow for Sargasso to be benefited from. Regarding computing, we've worked with Europe, with the ADC, with the center at Barcelona. We've worked with Hispasat. That's why Pelayo said before, people say Spain, Latin America. Well, Spain is present in Latin America, and we need to say this as well. We had a first program for supercomputing amongst both regions. Do you know what that is? You probably don't, because everyone is being attentive to whether Lula is there or not. But in the meantime, we have generated a software a program to bring together everyone that works on both sides of the Atlantic on supercomputing, so that they can access resources both from the main supercomputer in America, which is Brazil, and also the one that is accessible through the European Commission and the European centers, together with the Pact for Care, the Justice Statement, etc. This is the final point of a huge work that has been done. For instance, in this financial period, at the regional bilateral level with the European Union, we are beyond 250 million euros on this safety statement. This is a work of bringing work together, joint teams, improvement of procedures, improvement of the care for the victims, for the people. These are ways to be grounded, which are the things that we want to do. So when people ask us this CELAC Summit, the geopolitical context, I say everyone, without forgetting about the geopolitical context. We should focus on what needs to be done. The geopolitical context, yes or not, Europe and the LAC region will keep working together, and the issues that we have are not going to disappear in the current geopolitical context. What can happen is that they can worsen, but they won't go away. So we need to be there to keep working on them.
Muchas gracias, Félix. Agradezco.
Thank you so much, Felix. I thank you for the time readiness. We inherited a little delay from the previous session. Mr. Borrell has a commitment after his intervention here, and I'm going to ask our panelists to please stick on time. I'm going to give the floor to Beatriz Corredor, President of Evelia, to explain to us what's the strategy of the company she manages, of what was your experience in the Santa Marta Summit. Thank you. Thank you, Casa America, to Global Gateway, to Casa America, and to the Secretary of State, who's doing great work in Latin America, and we owe to her many of the successes. Ramon, thank you for saving me from a public fall here in public. Redella was at the summit due to a good relation with the European Investment Bank, with CAF, etc., due to our experience in the development of international connections. Redella has several companies. One of them is Red Eléctrica, that 40 years ago was funded as the first DCO of the world. The same company brought together the brain and the spine on the electric system that guarantees the access to everyone in the network and a bigger efficiency for consumers. Europe has the advantage to have the largest interconnected electrical system in the world. This is something that can be exported. This is a technology that can be exported. Latin America for the age is very important. We've been there for 26 years, first Peru, then Chile, and now Brazil. And we're specialists in managing huge networks, international networks. We did the first interconnection that was under the sea between Spain and Morocco. It has connections with Portugal, France, ambassadors, dear ambassador of Ireland, dear ambassador of Ukraine. We have the experience that we can bring this interconnection to those places where Europe has set a focus on strategic autonomy. Now it's being said that ESG is now being read as electricity, safety, and geopolitics. Something that says that the EU says that the safety was in the hands of the US, energy, Russia, and the goods in the name of China. But our most important ally is Latin America. They have the raw materials, but they require a huge quantity of efficient networks that can allow them to develop their renewable potential. Specific mention in Chile, Brazil, and Peru. It requires this network to integrate these renewables in an efficient way so that they can develop their industries. That's why we were there. One of the interconnections that Global Gateway is promoting is something we fought for a long time, which is the interconnection between Peru and Chile. And so you can get an idea of how diverging is the path of politics and technicalities. Well, there's 60 kilometers away between Peru and Chile, and it has a capacity to be developed that has already been proved through research that has been done by CAF, by the Andean Research Institute, and it just needs politics, a political agreement, because technically there are no issues, and from a regulatory perspective needs to be homogeneous. I believe Europe has a huge opportunity in Latin America. I think the electrical system in Europe is one of the main aspects of competitivity. We have the same talent as Latin America has. Latin America can allow to skip the mistakes we've done, the ones we mentioned before. They have the potential to go directly towards an interconnected electrical system that is efficient, self-sufficient, independent, and that can move forward through sustainability and electrification without going through the mistakes that Europe has done. Here's showing the map of interconnection between Europe and Chile. And I would like to thank Ambassador Fernandez Shaw, the promotion of Global Gateway to develop this amongst the many meetings we had. It was quite an intense agenda. In Santa Marta, I had one with the President of European Investment Bank, who asked, and we try to promote this from the business perspective, to promote this interconnection because it's critical to the European Union. I don't have a watch. We don't have a watch. We expect to the level of responsibility of the speakers. The European Parliament, we have 2 minutes, but here we allow you double. Now I will ask Alicia Montalvo, who is Manager of Climate Action and Positive Biodiversity at CAF, who was with us at the 25th anniversary at the round table. Probably Leon remembers, because it was a round table that we had with the presence of His Majesty the King. So I would like to ask you, before we get into the second stage of our round table, regarding the specific sectorial sectors, how do you assess the summit, take into account the role played by CAF in its preparation, and how do you see the results of this summit? I believe you've worked closely with the European Commission, and I would like to know, before you get into the detail of your specific action, what's the general assessment that you could present to us this evening regarding your presence at Santa Marta. Thank you so much for inviting CAF and me, on behalf of CAF, to be part of this review of the summit. Secretary of State, it's a pleasure to see you. Thank you for your words, Ramon. Well, after listening to all of you who have already taken the floor and all of your reflections, it's very difficult to have just one opinion. But I was thinking, and this is something that comes from the literature, one thing is the narrator, another is the perspective or the point of view. Sometimes it's the same, sometimes it isn't. In this context of the summit, there are many different narratives, but I believe that the perspective of the region is quite clear to bring it. It's quite important to bring it to the table. I don't know if I dare to, having here the presence of the ambassadors, but in Latin America and Caribbean institution, because in our directory, as you know, we only have countries of the region and Spain and Portugal. The vision is slightly different sometimes to what is from the perspective of Brussels or even from Spain. As a Spaniard myself, I tend to that side. But our assessment is pragmatic and positive. It's positive because it's very hard to find these spaces, these places to meet, creating the space for dialogue. And well, I work in aspects of nature and conservation, as you well said of my post, of my job title. Conservation without funding is conversation. And I love that play on words, because here we'll have something similar. Talking and talking without having the proper financial resources, it's just conversation. It's interesting. I believe the presence of multilateral institutions, the role of IDB, and especially CAF, that backed this from the beginning, has been very relevant. And I will dare say that the political summit and the political statement was especially relevant given the difficulties and the difficulty of reaching full consensus. I believe that the business summit, which we had in Brussels 2 years ago, and then a meeting with ministers of finance in Seville, that this summit has been highly significant, and Beatriz Corredor has mentioned it before. I believe get into specific context with the financial institutions. CAF made a commitment for $40 billion for the green agenda that's been mentioned by the State Secretary. So we went from the conversation to the opportunities. I have the watch in my hand, but I'm not looking at it. To summarize, our assessment is positive on the political aspect, but especially on the business aspect of it, looking at the needs to attract investment from the countries in the region. For me, as I work on this and I go through all countries because of the green agenda, I'm looking at all the challenges for mobility. That's where we need to speak about what it is that we're promoting. And we'll look at the topic of interconnections, but I believe in this sense, the summit added a lot, and I believe this is a way to become even worse. We went from conversation into action, and the fact that CAF was able to be there to back this summit is very special for us, given our commitments for investment in green, social, and digital agenda. Thank you so much, Alicia. I especially value your point of view, because those of us who have been through politics, such as Ramon, myself, or the president of Redeia, I say this under the control of the Secretary of State, many times we get to the mistake where we think that politics need to be this constant narrator that needs to be always the point of view of things. But here you're not acknowledging the importance of this. Now I would like to give the floor to Maria Romano, the Director of the European Investment Bank Office in Spain, to tell us, given the initial difficulties, no one remembers this, but we've talked about this now that we're going to commemorate the 40th anniversary of Spain and Portugal accessing the European communities, as they were called back then. It was very difficult to get the investment bank to work in the region. It took a lot of work of negotiations. I lived this stage. I used to work with European Commissioner Abel Matutes. It was a lot of hard work, and now it's wonderful to see how the bank, that even though it has a regional mandate, it allows for 10% of its capital, of its equity, to third countries. Please tell us a little bit more before you get into the detail of your experience in Santa Marta. What are the activities that the bank develops to strengthen the region and sustainable development with the countries of Latin America? Thank you, Nacho. Thank you for the foundation for having us here today. It's very easy to be here today as a representative of the European Investment Bank, because, well, I've already been well advertised. We have good news. I'm a kind face here to be today. I don't need to tell any of you that we are going through difficult times when building bridges. Dialogue and cooperation is more important than ever. The European Investment Bank is the financial arm of the European Union, and we're fully aligned with its priorities at the strategic level the European Union has. One of our main strategic priorities, because we have a plan with 8 strategic priorities, is the global action.
10% of our financing volume goes to territories outside of the EU. Pelayo said something that we're very proud of. We have a historic record this year, 3 billion euros of financing in the region. A lot has been said about the interconnection package in Central America, but there is more, because in the region we have a series of priorities that are in line with the EU strategy for that region that include energies, connectivity, sustainability, sustainable mobility, clean mobility, integration, digitalization, etc. Later on, I can share in greater detail what we're talking about, but our commitment with the region is nothing new. We've been cooperating with the region for 45 years and 18 billion euros financed in hundreds of projects. That shows our level of commitment. We went to the summit in Santa Marta with a very high-level representation. Our President Cavino supports and is a great believer of development and cooperation, which is necessary with public entities and with private companies as well to mobilize private capital in the region. Our cooperation with the rest of agents is excellent, like IDB or CAF. And what that is doing in turn is that partnerships are being reinforced. Nacho, you're looking at me, you're giving me the eye of time management, but don't worry, I will help you manage the time. Thank you, Maria. The truth is that we're not doing great on time. So, with your anticipation, I now turn to Beatriz. You were saying, Beatriz, that we're talking about the transition, but without transmission, there's no transition, meaning that without the electric grid, there is no transition. True, but we took good note and we are well informed. So I wanted to ask you, in order to develop that grid, those transmission networks and those infrastructures, from your company, how do you see the deployment of such networks, and how can you finance projects of this size, considering what Maria and Alicia have said and what the EU Commission have decided for Europe in scope? Well, what the EU recognized is that indeed networks are an integrating element for energy and decarbonization and for European competitiveness. What I would like to say is that we as Europeans cannot just go to Europe with sovereignty. What you learn from working there is bilateral and bidirectional. We, as a company, have learned immensely from the Latin American experience. And we think that learning has a lot of value for Spanish and European companies because deploying networks takes tremendous interinstitutional coordination. Coordination has to be very, very clear. So the different governance levels need to reach an agreement. In Spain, it would be central government, autonomous regions, and so on. And then if there is a regulatory discrepancy, meaning which licenses and permits you need, is a critical point. And I am aware that the EU is placing a lot of importance to try and simplify it. Secondly, and key, is to understand that a network is deployed in a territory where people live, and those people have a right to defend their biodiversity, their landscape, their nature, their way of life, their heritage, their cultural heritage, their architecture, and their anthropology. Now, in general, companies think it's inefficient to go and listen and to ask how things could be done better. But that's what you have to do, because normally if you go and ask first, they might think there's less imposition and the networks might be deployed faster. I think this is key. We have learned a lot about how to manage local communities in Latin America. Latin America has a component of indigenous people, of a very varied, rich, and complex geography. And the lessons learned from companies that build infrastructure there has been key. That is key. Thirdly, financing. The problem is not a lack of money. The problem is to make sure that the money is coordinated so that it reaches to the end and to move from reflection to action. Everyone is very clear about it, but then someone has to do it. So it's very important that the capital from Global Gateway or from the multilateral banks know where it needs to go. We need to be able to coordinate it to make sure that those euros reach the ground. Something else that's fundamental is that regulation has to be compatible, and we're talking about countries where electric regulations are not in line, and if a country is resistant to change its regulation, or to see what is going to benefit more, my country or the country on the other side of the border, well, that is a problem. And you need to change the regulation so that the regulation makes it possible for countries that are in both sides have benefits. And that's something we can do. That's something that the EU can do. Something that that Commissioner Hensen said yesterday is that interconnections are fundamental so that the entire region can become integrated. I think Spain can be a key actor of what has happened with interconnections in Europe. Thanks to the EIB, less than 30% of the capacity in Europe is integrated. The minimum established by the EU is 15%. But what happens? We have the Pyrenees. And on the other side of the Pyrenees, there's a country that has not led interconnection well. And that has helped us learn where are the pain points that can be sold in another country as material to not develop interconnection. So I think that learning has been bilateral, and I think that if we approach it with humility, it will be much better for everyone. And then finally, Spain is key to be a bridge between the EU and Latin America, and it is key. The participation of Spanish companies is critical. And we have a lot of soft power, which means influence, means cultural communication and also emotional communication. Spain has an emotional connection, and I think that Spanish companies, therefore European companies, can take advantage of. We are a clear example of that with humility and listening to your counterparts and taking emotions into consideration can reach more results than through pride. I think indeed that the learning point of EU from yesterday was very promising, and I also think you've hit the nail on the head, and it is to avoid paternalism. When we read the association agreements with all the countries in the region that Pelayo was mentioning, we had a lot of problems with the clause regarding democracy, because many are bilateral and they can be solicited by both parts. I would like to address Alicia. I think you are financing a series of flagship projects trying to highlight not only the electric grid, but also financing that has to be green. You've spoke about 40 billion. How do you plan on addressing this challenge, and what are the innovative instruments that you are handling? Well, thank you very much. I really liked listening to what you said of having to know about a reality of where you want to deploy a project. At CAF, I am in charge of safeguards, and sometimes we listen complaints of, oh, how long is this going to take? It's going to take forever. But yes, you do have to talk to the communities. That is part of our green agenda. 5 years ago, CAF did a capital enlargement of $7 billion. It was the largest in the history of CAF until then. And the pledge was that 40% of its financing had to be green. That meant 25,000 billions for the following year. We are happy to say that we reached that pledge in 2025, and that's why we decided to undertake the new commitment of the green agenda, 40 billion from now until 2030. The figure is really staggering, but we're sure we're going to reach it, and that's what we said at the COP in Belém. How do we do it? Well, there is an important aspect in mitigation having to do with green energy and the networks of interconnection, transmission and distribution. That's very important. But there's something else that for Spanish companies is very important, which has to do with adaptation and risk management in case of disasters. You spoke about storm watch earlier in Central America. We are also working with the Spanish Agency for Cooperation in systems to face natural disasters. Adaptation for CAF is very important. We are a bank that represents countries, so we understand that for the countries in the region, having access to energy is very important, of course. Access to clean energy is important, certainly, but it's also fundamental to face climate change impacts, because in some countries it takes 2 to 3% of GDP every year, and that's very significant, and sometimes it's not very considered. Then biodiversity. This region has 60% of world biodiversity. And of course, I address ecosystems, but more than that, we are talking about the systems that the ecosystem gives, meaning clean water, protection to climate change effects, air quality, or the production of agri-food resources, which is also very important for the relationship between Latin America and the Caribbean. There, we see lots of opportunities for a multilateral institution to finance projects and to work with countries. So mitigation, energy, sustainable mobility, but we also want to work on natural disaster management and adaptation, resilient infrastructures, and better infrastructures. There are a lot of opportunities for European and Spanish companies there. Now, in terms of digitalization, geolocalization of natural disasters, ecosystem management are full of opportunities, not only to build relationships between European countries and companies in the region, but also where CAF can make a big contribution and reach those 40 billion that have been pledged. So we will keep working on how we've been working, but there are niches that are important in that region. There are big problems, but we also share the vision that this is a region of opportunities. Thank you very much, Alicia. Maria, you spoke about the cooperation and the many projects that are examples in the region. I know you have many, but can you give us some examples of financing for sustainability, and particularly in how you plan on mobilizing private capital? That is a subject that matters a lot to us. Yes, I said earlier that we are the EU bank, but we have a slogan that says that we are the climate bank, meaning that sustainability and green financing are fundamental for us. That's why such a big percentage of our financing is designed to fight climate change. In the case of Latin America, this percentage is 70%. That shows our commitment to sustainability in Latin and the Caribbean. I brought some examples. I actually wrote them down because we have many. Of this $3 billion, how many of them have become concrete projects? The Secretary of State was saying it's very important to choose your partner. And I would like to transmit that if you choose the EIB, you will have good company. We are a very reliable partners because we are very capable of delivery in terms of concrete actions and not only commitments. So in this 3 billion euros of records in 2025, we have translated them into actions for the green transition in network connectivities, the $150 million for electric integration in 600 solar project in Colombia for $200 million, collaboration in the private sector. You were mentioning to mobilize private capital. We collaborate with entities in Brazil. We've signed $300 million with Unión y Energía, $300 million also in Panama, with Naturgy for distribution grids in Ecuador, in the improvement of access to clean water and sewage with signed with Ecuador Development Bank, just to show you that we want to cooperate with local agents. Sustainable transport and clean urban mobility has translated into a financing of $250 million in San Jose, Costa Rica for an electric train. We are also financing metro lines in Bogota, in Quito, in Sao Paulo. Integration with private capital. The example would be launching innovative financial instruments. There's an agreement with BNP Paribas to share risks for renewable energy and transport. We also focus, importantly, in developing certain groups, such as female entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, And an example is that at the COP in Belém, we announced an agreement with Banco do Brasil for women entrepreneurs and climate resilience. I would like to insist on Beatriz and the role that Spain has to reinforce this. We, of course, are an agent of the EU, but since I am here in Spain representing the EIB, I can bear witness to the fact that Spain is really focused and in line with us and we with you. So I very much appreciate the support that you have given us to that. We have 4 offices in the region, and there is a lot of activities and collaboration with the EU delegations through embassies, with other multilateral banks, etc. That's basically the message I wanted to leave with you. I wanted to show you that this goes beyond words. We are showing concrete actions. What a better way to conclude this part of the session than with Maria's words, that we need to move from speeches in summits to the accounting books, and we need to do concrete actions. Thank you to Alicia, Beatriz, and Maria for your participation in this session. And I would now like to ask Felix to stay on the stage, and I would like to ask the representatives of the IDB and Ispasat for the next session. Thank you.
¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo vas? Qué gusto verte.
Igualmente, voy a que me quiten. Si quieren, se pone en contacto con nosotros. Por supuesto. Muchísimas gracias.
Bueno, vamos a comenzar rápidamente.
Right. Let's begin this second section of this first session, titled Mobilization of Private Capital for a Green Transition, Investment in Digital Infrastructure, Value Chains of Critical Commodities, and Circular Economy. My friend Luis Jimenez Maquinis from the IDB, Director for Europe, is here. Fernando Ciacera, who's joining us online. He is the Ministry of Mining of Argentina. Miguel Ángel Panduro, CEO of Ispasat, and Oscar Rosbach, a dear friend that was with us in Mexico and who was part of a company called Dutch Clean Tech Mexico. First, Luis, I would like to ask you, the IDB was a pioneer bank in giving support to Latin American and Caribbean countries for the green transition, focusing on critical materials, critical minerals. Can you share the bank section? Thank you so much for the invitation. It is a pleasure to be here with you. Yes, to address the energy transition and critical minerals, I wanted to go back to what was said in the beginning. For me, Latin America and the Caribbean and Europe need each other, but you have to take advantage of the opportunities because we see that it's not always the case. However, now it is necessary to work together, and critical minerals are a key issue. I was with the president in London last week, where he worked in the FTI Global Banking Company, and he said that the IDB was going to have a portfolio of 30 billion, which is quite an increase from the previous year that was 23 billion. And a lot has to do with critical minerals and the digital transition. For me, the need of both regions for each other has to do with the fact that Europe needs critical minerals and Latin America has the minerals. Latin America has 60% of world lithium and 40% of copper and silver. Hurricane Melissa in Jamaica has been mentioned too, and that is the other side of the digital transition and critical minerals. In this region, 1.2 million are lost every hour due to natural disasters. This is why I'm saying that both regions need each other. In terms of what we do in the IDB group, it's very clear for us. We work, and very well, with the European Commission in terms of critical minerals. We have work in gender and green transition, in critical raw materials. We work with the public and private sector. In the public sector, we work to have the facility of regulatory frameworks in order to have sustainable mining that works to create jobs in the countries, because value chains are very relevant. Secondly, I'd like to mention our private weapon called Bid Invest to Share, which gives us the capacity to work with the private sector and to finance the private sector, allowing us to work with the public sector in regulatory frameworks. We already have that experience working with governments. We also can finance companies that may not have local presence and may not have the Latin American context. IDB is the bridge between Latin America and Europe. 16 of our 48 members are European, so a third of our members are European, so we can work as a bridge. To finish, not only do we contribute in mining and critical minerals, we do, but we want that to create jobs and to help the economic growth and the green transition, which is a global problem. Thank you, Luis. We have online with us Fernando Ciacera, National Director of Value Chain and Mining in Economics from the Ministry of Mining in Argentina. Luis has shared the possibilities that the subcontinent has for critical minerals. Argentina has fascinating projections in terms of copper. So, Mr. Ciacera, it would be interesting to learn how your ministry is working and what opportunities for development you perceive to favor sustainable investments from the European Union in this case. In the inaugural session of this seminar, a lot was said about the possibilities that the new agreement will bring in terms of trade and investment. Hopefully, the agreement with Mercosur will be signed in the next few days. So, Mr. Ciacera, the floor is yours. Well, thank you so much. I am the first participant online, so I wanted to make sure that you can hear me. Yes, we can hear you. I wanted to say firstly that I am the National Director of Value Chain and Mining Economics. I am not the minister I'm not the minister of mining. And I would like to share with you what's happening here in Argentina. First of all, I want to thank you. I want to take the Euro-America Foundation for the invitation. It is very important for us to participate in fora like this one. You said earlier already, but Argentina is living a historic moment. It's very favorable for mining or for critical transition minerals. We call them also security minerals. We have projects in two essential minerals for electromobility, which are lithium and copper. We have 7 projects for lithium under production already. 3 started production a year and a half ago only. They are reaching optimum capacity. And many others are work in progress. They are under construction. For copper, very recently, last week, it was announced that a copper project in Catamar will be relaunched. It will produce copper in Argentina starting in 2028. Mendoza also approved regulation for environmental impact assessment for copper. We also have a world-class project in copper. We have a historic record for mining that will be greater than 5 billion this year. It is modest compared to some of our neighbors, but the production is quite significant. We understand that we will become a country that exports mining products instead of importing them. Argentina, in more than 50% of unexplored territory, has great projections of lithium concentration. We are the first in resources and third in reserves and fifth in production. But we hope to scale up to top 3 in the next few years. And in copper, we're serviced as well in terms of resources and reserves. Macroeconomically, our country is solid. That is attractive for investments. We're working on inflation, so we are attractive for investments. We have 2 tools in the Secretary of Mining. One is the Network of Mining Investment. They are a bank that promotes investment. There is a law also that is very beneficial in terms of tax incentives for mining investments. And we are working to reduce red tape and make it more modern. We're also working with a scheme of investments, of large investments, for investments of more than 200 million that offers legal security, among other benefits. We have 10 approved projects for lithium and copper for more than 6 billion and 11 projects that are under assessment currently. There is a lot of interest to develop those projects. Then, in terms of transparency, we have a new law, LATIS, which is an initiative that increases transparency in the whole mining activity. We have portals that publish data of production, employment, and exports. We believe that those tools and these conditions, with the resources that we have with transparency, give good protection and investment incentives, both in the mining industry as well as for the entire value chains associated with mining. Thank you very much, Mr. Cesara, for your participation. I would now like to give the floor to Miguel Ángel Panduro, the CEO of Hispasat. The fact of being able to guarantee security or safety and close the digital gap are key elements for Latin American growth, but that requires infrastructure. My specific question is it possible to have strategic autonomy in a satellite shared by different sovereign states?
Good afternoon. First, I would like to thank the Euro-America Foundation for inviting me to be here in this panel. Hispasat is a 36-year-old project that was born out of the promotion of the 5th centenary. And we were born out of this connection between Spain and Latin America. We already had international Spanish TV channel, and 10 years later, when we decided to reach into internationalization, our focus was America. Throughout those years, we had many economic cycles in the region, but we've been there for 36 years. We have strong track record. So we consider that we know well the region. There's been talk here about the great challenges of the region, safety, migration, but I believe that it's also highly relevant to set our focus on economic growth. And economic growth is associated to competitivity, to the digitalization that you talk about, and there's no digitalization, ladies and gentlemen, if we don't have connectivity. Due to the configuration of the region in aspects of telecommunications infrastructure is not developed enough, and due to its strategic position, the role of satellites is key. For many years, when the globalization was a fact, different suppliers competed there amongst them, and we've been providing service for a time. But in the question you asked me, there's a key word for Europe, which is strategic autonomy. Nowadays, there are certain men seated in offices in North America who are developing a series of constellations. So most countries, therefore, won't depend only on their governmental strategic alliances. They might depend of the desire of a man who is sitting at an office. Within that context, the strategy that Hispasat is developing in Latin America, with the huge help of the Commission, the Global Gateway Initiative, and also with some international entities to support for financing of developing a concept of sharing a critical infrastructure, such as a communication satellite, guaranteeing to each and every one of the countries that they can, from their own territory, operate that satellite, which gives them this autonomy, this independence, and this is a concept that we're trying to promote in the region of sharing those infrastructures through our help for development. Through many years, we've been working hard in the region with very important countries in the region, such as Brazil, Colombia, Costa Rica, countries in the Caribbean as well. And we hope that very soon we'll be able to have good news for the promotion and development of those projects. In this, I'm hugely thankful to the support we have from all of the intergovernmental organizations, especially the European Commission, who is helping us to promote this type of projects, and that's been on the agenda of the Summit of CELAC. Thank you, Miguel Ángel. I would like to salute Oscar Rosbach, who is listening to us from Mexico, from Dutch Clean Tech. I'm happy to see you again after our seminar, our successful seminar there a few weeks ago. It's a pleasure to have you again amongst us. And I would like to ask you, from your business perspective, how do you see and to which degree the Global Gateway Agenda can facilitate sustainable investments and the development of projects such as for water or circular economy with the topics of sargassum? Thank you, Felix. I would like to stick to the allotted time. I would like to thank all of you for participation in this high-level seminar to share the arduous work done by the Casa América. Especially, I would like to say hi to Mr. Ramon Jauregui, who we have Luisa Peña and Patricia Fayate. Evidently, Felix Hernandez Shaw, Director of Latin America and the Caribbean, who leads the Global Gateway Initiative. I'm sorry to not be able to be there. I cannot see those that he's using today, the bracelets that the speakers there could verify. Well, you ask us about the presence of a European company in countries as Mexico adds three specific elements: trust, the proven technology, and the financing models who have grown immensely and that allow to accelerate projects that otherwise will take many years. In the sector of water, where development is critical, and from the lack of perspective to the need of energy efficiency that is key for the cooperation, the European experience helps reduce risk, to improve the quality of treatment, to guarantee solutions that comply with much higher international standards than what we have in our countries. So that really elevates the bar to intend to comply with standards that improve the quality of the water treatments that are undoubtedly necessary. The most interesting thing about all of this is that we're not only solving local problems, but it opens up the possibility, the huge possibility of European investment in our country, in our region. There's a huge and real demand for projects. The projects are looking for partners, for people who can invest, build, and operate the system in a sustainable manner. With this, we could mention that Europe has this credibility, and that is key, the trust. Mexico is a dynamic market where these alliances are moving forward speedily, and in the political agenda of our country, President Sheinbaum has said at the first point of her political agenda, the hydric topic is one of the main challenges of her administration. The main difference, I would say, Felix, is the topic of the model of Das Clean Tech. Our company comes from Holland. It has two generations in the Pickenbrook family, and since 1895 has specialized in the topic of treatment of water, all types of water, processed waters, industrial, drinking water. The thing is, we don't sell water treatment plants. We sell services, cubic meters of water that comply with regulation, what the population needs. In Mexico, we have very bad experience. There's over 3,000 water treatment plants that are abandoned, that are not working. So that's why we believe this public-private partnership and a right operation long-term provides a huge opportunity to our companies and many others in the sector. Thank you so much. We couldn't see Felix bracelets. I believe he is not wearing any. He only shows them around when he is on the Mexico forums. Luis. Digital agenda is key in the development of the countries in the LAC region. How do you value from everything that has to do with development? I know it's quite a wide question, but I will ask you to be brief. To mention this briefly, digital infrastructure is the same as the physical infrastructure of previous times. It's part of what needs to be had in countries. We had research from the OECD. 86% of population is covered by wideband mobile coverage. Only 58% of the countries of the OECD. In Latin America countries and the Caribbean, there's a gap. So, $108 billion are needed to close this gap. These are at the same time challenges and opportunities. At the same time, I would like to talk about what we said of the European Union. Regional digitalization also helps with integration. So this is something where the European Union is involved for this and for the region. This is something that I wanted to mention in this sense. Since digital infrastructure is key for the regional development, it provides efficiency to the value chain and to different cultures. That's why I believe this is important for IDB regarding the figures that we mentioned. I would like to highlight two examples of things we're already working on. These are collaborations of the private-public partnerships. One is with Nokia with 50 millions to ensure safe telecommunications and the segregation of the wideband networks. This will help with the digital gap. The idea was to do this with many other European companies that can work in Latin America and the Caribbean. And the second, I have Felix here. I have to talk about Global Gateway, and one that we have with the French Development Agency, which is the building of underwater cables between to connect the Amazonian region in Brazil with Europe. The clear idea is that we try to transform the region in a technological node, as we mentioned before, regarding the creation of employment, data networks, etc. To finish, I wanted to mention this regarding the need to leverage opportunities. We have the possibility to finish this agreement between the European Union and Mercosur. This will be the largest trade area in the world. Our president will be traveling towards the summit in Mercosur for the two regions, as I said. Thank you so much, Luis. I'm going to look back onto Argentina, and I will ask Fernando, talking about what Luis mentioned, how do you imagine that cooperation between the European Union and Latin America can contribute to a greater integration in what deals with technological infrastructure? We talked about before about lithium and copper. What are the opportunities that are being identified in the advanced in the process for the knowledge transfer and the strengthening of capacities for new value chains? What Luis just mentioned. I would like to say hi to Felix. We saw each other in Santa Marta. The communication between the European Union and Latin America is key. It has a huge potential to transform the industry, both in the region and throughout the whole world. We are initiating this way to be one of the trusted suppliers of the region through the creation of value and development, both upstream, downstream. In that sense, we are mainly focusing on the lithium, digitalization, resource efficiency, automatization. These are all key to create a much more efficient and competitive industry and kinder towards the environment. Beatriz talked about the electric infrastructure, which is key to the development of projects that have to do with copper, logistics itself in the European countries is key to generate these corporations to power through this private input. Another of the factors that we're seeing is human capital. We will need to move forward with this project, human developments, both for blue and white collar workers. On the short term, this will be crucial. We have this copper project. It has around 10,000 people at the global category and 2,000 to 3,000 people at the operational level. So we see a joint cooperation that we believe is key. In terms of quality, both for goods and services, for products and services. Argentina has a long tradition, not in the mining industry, we're beginning there. The collaboration needs to adapt it to the capacity and to become more efficient towards this plan. We see a huge area for collaboration and to create a joint synergy that can benefit all countries that are connected. Thank you so much. We have to finish. I have 2 questions left to Miguel Ángel Panduro. Hispasat is part of this European project called IRIS 2. How do you value the presence of Hispasat on this project? Can it be a bridge for Latin America? IRIS Square is this European initiative for a constellation of satellites of a certain technology. It has a budget of 11 billion and 1 goal, so that Europe can have this capacity at its own hands without depending from third countries. This is an innovative model that is financed through a public-private partnership. Parties through public, and a third is done with private equity from the 3 large European satellite operators. As a sample, when sharing the demand, because it's a system for global coverage, Europe has a particular interest in a territory, but it's supposed to cover the whole world. The idea for the coverage of America rests on Hispasat because it belongs to our area of interest. This autonomy, this system, can be used by Europe as a diplomatic tool in order to establish alliances. For us, as a company who is present in that territory, we also want to take advantage of that capacity to differentiate from the current satellites that are in orbit today, because it allows us to focus more on certain application and safety models. And it has risen many questions in the negotiations of the governmental negotiations that we have on many countries, because they are looking to not be dependent on a single supplier, which seems quite reasonable. In this context, Hispasat has been the focus of IRIS Square in Latin America. Thank you so much, Miguel Ángel. Now I'm going to ask Oscar Rosbach in Mexico, so he can very briefly, please, tell us from his experience with a European company that develops its own projects in Mexico, can contribute from its experience to solve somehow the water challenges that it has in the region, and which opportunities are being presented for these countries in the sector. Thank you so much, Felix. I will take the floor to Mr. Fernando Cacera so that we work together, because our energy projects need many water treatment plants. Thank you so much. Thank you again. The Global Gateway Agenda creates a political framework that provides safety for investment. And it's key because you can be very positive, a dreamer, but with that money we cannot give viability to the projects. This gives us the possibility to create an environment of private capital for lower risk at long-term infrastructure projects. In Latin America, the projects are large, the needs are urgent, because for many years we've had the need to create sufficient infrastructure, and the solution requires an international solution. In our case, initiatives such as the water projects that we develop have to do with the circular economy. Water, waste, and energy are always together. Leveraging an opportunity as a raw material in the case of sargassum, specifically in the Mexican Caribbean, in Cancun, matches exactly the goals of Global Gateway. We can use sustainable technology that generates a social impact and the creation of green value chains. These are the projects that have funding nowadays. European countries can associate with the governments, local organizations in a responsible way to transform these needs into a success. In the specific case of the sargassum, I had the opportunity to talk with Felix Fernandez Shaw during the 6th forum last October. In that specific case, it's a huge project for circular economy that in Cancun, specifically, where the sargassum had been seen as a problem because of the lack of the construction of the value chain, to turn that opportunity into a huge opportunity to create sources of repayment for the huge amount that it takes to build that infrastructure. It was really a small input. It was production that were given the value to the industrialization of that sargassum to create energy and important sources of repayment. There's a huge opportunity in Mexico and in the whole of the Caribbean to be able to solve this problem through a model that can be replicated. Thank you. Thank you so much, Oscar. If Felix doesn't have anything to add, we haven't forgotten about anything, but since you're not going to present the OECD report, well, you'll have time. I would like to thank all of our speakers.
Gracias.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. Due to agenda issues, because I have a plane to take, and I already spent enough days on the other side of the ocean. Hello, Brian. And I have to leave. We have decided to shorten the previous intervention. We're going to give place to this part of today's seminar. As Nacho said, I didn't want to finish one thing without connecting a couple of ideas regarding the relationship between the EU, Latin America, Caribbean, and Global Gateway. The Euro-America Foundation that's been helping us for a long time, help us to bring people together to explain what Global Gateway is, had the great success today of bringing together several stakeholders. We've had Verdeja, we've had the IDB, the European Investment Bank. With all of them, we had last week and this week regular online meetings to manage the 20 projects for electrical interconnection that we have, where we bring together the European industry, the European and Latin America multilateral development banks, the Latin America governments, etc. As Luis said, this is not a matter of money. We have enough money. It's a matter of focus. We need to bring together at the table, as Nacho said, and as Beatriz Correo said, us as Europeans, we're not going to give many lessons about European interconnections. We don't have many positive lessons, but we have learned some things. You need to talk a lot. This is one of the things the European Commission does very well. We talk a lot. You don't all need to laugh at the same time. Luis, please don't laugh. For us, it was very important, our collaboration with the IDB, the European Investment Bank, with CAF, and with the EFD, with the KfW, to bring together many companies, banks, and governments. We have companies such as Redeia. We also have many other European, French, German, Italian companies that can work on interconnections. And our proposal in Global Gateway is to introduce the Europeans as a group where we have a lot that we can bring to the table: funding, experience, regulatory experience, etc. The same thing has been done by the Euro-America Foundation with Dasvintec and Hispasat. With Hispasat, we have gotten to an operator when getting to one of these trips to America, where they presented this wonderful idea of connection for telecommunications and also sovereignty in the control of the communications. And what we did with CAF, with the European Investment Bank, with the Spanish Corporation, with Spain, and with the European Union, was to think that this wasn't just a trade project for Hispasat, but rather a wondrous opportunity for last kilometer satellite connection, but also to train in satellite technology that nowadays is so in fashion for reasons that we don't need to get into now. Again, this is one of the large projects that we have that was presented in Latin America in the summit, and this is how we work, as we have done as well with Dutch Clean Tech and many other companies that have shown us how in the collection of the algae and within the Caribbean stuff in Dramatic. This is something we've done as well. The European Union, sometimes we don't talk among each other. It has been funded in Andalusia, in the Baltic, and we have this company, not only Dutch Clean Tech, but we have a Finnish company and a French company that are specialized in the collection and the valorization of the sargassum in the cosmetic industry, for instance. What I wanted to explain by thanking Ramon, Nacho, Luis, and Patricia, the work that you all do with us, is how by bringing together the companies, the financial entities, and the governments, we can generate a series of projects that not only invest, but they also create prosperity and sustainable development in the current world that is talking about many other things, while what we do is we try to focus on our work.
We thought it was particularly fascinating to invite the OECD and to present the report that I know, but I won't be able to see the presentation, unfortunately. I wanted to thank Raga, the director, and Antonio, because they will present a report that we requested some time ago. It has to do with the impact on foreign direct investment from Europe in the region. You know, we always say that we Europeans are great, which we are, but it is good to see the hard facts, to see the figures. And since the OECD are the masters of data, the kings of reports, along with the Latin American Economic Outlook, there is a lot of work being done to bring big talents together to see what the data is saying. And what the data is saying is something that politicians have told us too. And that is that Latin America and the Caribbean need investment in added value. They need industrialization, which Beatriz said already. It's great to have industrialization, but if you don't have a stable electric grid or enough grid to share, industrialization is not going to get far. Miguel Angel also said if you do not have good connections, you're not going to be very industrialized as a region. What we tried to do with this report that I wanted to present today is precisely the investments in Latin America and the Caribbean. Where are they going? Where is foreign direct investment? Where is it going? Depending on who talks, we know that Europe is sometimes the first or the second or the third source of greenfield investment. Sometimes we are ranked as the top. But what we wanted to study with this report is, aside from financing, investment, and money, what do we bring to the region? We speak about standards, about work, about capacity building in human capital. But if we decide to work with Espacat and we generate satellite technology in Latin America, someone needs to know how to do it, because it's not going to be the CEO of Espacat doing it himself. Or if we are going to interconnect Latin America and the Caribbean with an electric grid, I think Beatriz has great plans for capacity building. Because if we have 20 projects, I don't know how many people we will need, but we will need a lot of trained talent. What we do, and I can guarantee that, is to always try that added value is local and work is local, and that the conversations are always local. What we do with the IDB in terms of critical materials, there has to be a local benefit, because otherwise Europe will not be different from the others or from its own past. I think we are clearly focused on what our investments bring. That's what today I wanted to present today, and I am very happy, and I want to thank the OECD to come and present it, because I really think that their conclusions will allow us all to think and to learn. Because maybe the OECD might say, well, you're not doing as much as you think, or maybe you are. And maybe in those topics where we think we're doing enough, it's good to know with figures if that is really the case. I want to thank you very much for your presence this evening. I have to run to the airport. Maybe Espacat and Rodella can figure out a quicker way to take me back to Europe, but this is all that Global Gateway can do right now. Thank you very much to everyone, and thank you to the Fundación Euroamericana.
Just before you leave, Felix, thank you very much for introducing the report so well, and we will take it from here. Safe travels. Thanks. Good afternoon. I am sorry, and maybe I can allow you to get headsets who need it. We decided to wake you up a little bit by speaking English here in this session. My Spanish is limited to Vamos a la Playa and Sí, claro, and that is not the topic of this report, I have to admit. But we are extremely honored to be invited to come here and present this report, assessing the socio-economic impact of foreign direct investment in Latin America and the Caribbean. We have a couple of printed copies that we will gladly give first come, first serve. But I would like to draw your attention to this, which was in your program. It has a QR code where you can download the full report. So if you are not the owner of the printed one, have no fear, the report is already online. I want to thank our hosts at Euroamerica, and of course our partners at the European Union, and in Latin America, of course, and the Caribbean, and all of you joining us here today. This has been an extremely interesting conversation. and comes at a very good time following the EU CELAC Summit in Santa Marta. And this is a moment that matters for both regions, so it's good to connect so soon after. And as I said, we are here, my colleague Antonio Gomez from the Directorate of Financial Affairs at the OECD, and Marta, sorry Marta, your last name, Marta from the Global Relations Directorate, that demonstrates that this report is across the OECD House collaborative effort from the Development Center, DAF and GRC, so we are all here present today to launch it. We have heard about the discussion today about opportunities. Of course, there are challenges, but there are a lot of opportunities emerging for companies on both sides of the Atlantic. And with partnership and collaboration and the information and the data that we are bringing to the table, we are hoping that this can better inform the path forward and the decisions that will be taken. And we sincerely hope that this report can serve as a solid basis to shed light on the contribution of the EU investments in the LAC region, while also, to date, so far, while also addressing future shared challenges and inspiring new partnerships on top of the ones that we have heard so much about today between companies and policymakers in both regions. And we have had, as I said, good collaboration within the OECD, but also with external partners, many policymakers, experts, practitioners, private sector partners from both regions took part in the making of the report, and we are very excited to present it here, as I said, and just as I said, following the EU CELAC Summit, where the EU and CELAC renewed their commitment to a more strategic and a deeper partnership, and addressing the need for strong private sector engagement and for progress on green and digital transitions. So investment, and especially foreign direct investment, stands at the center of that goal. So here, without further ado, I'm going to see if the slideshow will be working here. Nope. There we go. I want to start by talking about sort of the broader development context in Latin America and the Caribbean. And challenges, yes, they continue to face the region. We have productivity that grows slowly. Total investment remains low, including investment in infrastructure. We have limited tax revenues, and this reduces the space for social policies and public investment. Informality remains high, and that affects job quality and productivity. And there's a rise also in climate risks. And skills mismatch hold back firms that want to adopt to new technologies and move into a higher value activities. However, and that's on the other side of the slide, the LAC region is full of opportunities, endless opportunities that we need to tap into. It has vast renewable resources, as we have been hearing about today: solar, wind, hydropower. Critical minerals has also been repeatedly mentioned here for the green and digital industries. It has space for technological upgrading and for deeper integration into global value chains, and, which is a huge asset, a young and dynamic population with strong potential for innovation and for skills development. In our recently launched Latin American Economic Outlook that we actually launched in Santa Marta at the summit, and that is also a partnership between us and CAF is represented here, and the European Union is also a partner and a funding partner in producing the LEO. There we highlighted opportunities for promoting and financing production transformation in the region. And building on our analysis of past FDI flows to Latin America and their development impact, the question really is, how can FDI, especially FDI that is originating from the European Union, help turn these opportunities into concrete and lasting development outcomes? The role of FDI in supporting structural transformation in LAC. Let's take a deeper look at that. Our findings in the report confirm that FDI is essential to closing the investment gap in Latin America and the Caribbean. And the region accounts for around 6% of the global FDI stock, if you will. And FDI inflows at roughly 3% of GDP are higher than in many other emerging and developing economies. Despite the volatility in recent years, FDI has remained structurally significant in LAC and continues to be a key source of capital, technology, and know-how. FDI also brings productivity gains, but the scale of these gains depends on the region's productive structure. In LAC, FDI often flows into relatively low productivity sectors, including lower value-added manufacturing, such as motor vehicles and food and beverages. But at the same time, our analysis shows that foreign firms operating in LAC are, on average, more productive than domestic firms. For example, foreign firms in Costa Rica are 85% more productive than domestic firms, and 78% more productive in the Dominican Republic, and these are high numbers. These firms often use advanced technologies, and they have stronger links to global markets. And on the other side, this fact creates real opportunities for local firms to learn from them, to take the advantage of having the technology present, and learn through also, and take advantage also through the supply chains and through workers that are moving between firms. Over the past decade, 2 decades, around 30% of FDI has been directed to technology and knowledge intensive, the TKI sectors, yet very many opportunities in higher value activities still remain untapped. And EU investment has indeed help diversify and upgrade the exports. When EU investments increase, the share of the medium and high-tech goods in total exports also rises, and this we see in our analysis. And again, Costa Rica is a good example of this shift. FDI helped to build a strong medical device industry, and EU investors now play an important role in that growth. So the transfer, the technology transfer and the increase in skills is really an important factor in this matter. Oops. I think I have done here something. Here we go. The report also shows that FDI is supporting the green and digital transitions. Around 13% of the investment of the FDI in the region has targeted the digital sectors, And there is a shift from traditional telecommunications toward digital services, such as data centers, software, and IT services. And these investments create new opportunities for better jobs, but they also require strong digital infrastructure, good regulation, and again, the right skills. FDI in renewable energy has also grown very rapidly, and between 2003 and 13 and 2014 and 2024, FDI in renewables have more than doubled, despite continued fossil fuel investment as well. And Colombia is a noteworthy example of the green transition. FDI to fossil fuels plummeted while renewable energy increased, and that is also driven mostly by the EU. And finally, the EU investment plays a major role in the region's clean energy transition. Between 2003 and 24, capital investment announced in renewable energy projects in LAC amounted to $234 billion US, and more than half of that, 56%, came from EU investors. Solar energy has emerged as a key technology in the EU-led green transition, and solar energy has played a particularly large role in the Dominican Republic, where in the last decade it received 15% of total FDI in the country, the majority of which coming from the EU. So now it's my great pleasure to give the floor to my colleague Antonio Gomez from the Department or Directorate of Financial Affairs. And I have to conclude with, I forgot to mention it to Felix before he left. I would like to get his permission to use the description of the OECD as masters of data and kings of reports. I thought that was a fitting way to describe us. Over to you, Antonio.
Thank you so much, Raga. Y quería decir algunas palabras en español, en castellano, y agradecer a la Fundación Euroamérica, agradecer a la Casa América, agradecer a la Comisión Europea, a Félix, y decir que es verdaderamente un placer estar acá en Madrid para una discusión que me pareció hasta ahora extraordinaria. Felicitaciones. And I'm going to turn to English, and really now what I wanted to do is really to look at the labor market implications of all these investment dynamics that Raga was presenting and outline a series of policy considerations. So Greenfield FDI is a major source of job creation in Latin America and the Caribbean, and our estimates suggest that it has generated around 5.5 million jobs in the last 2 decades, which corresponds to roughly 4.4% of total employment in the region and around 12% of global greenfield FDI-related jobs, which is a higher share than the region's share in the world's population, which is 8%. On average, LAC registers around 3,000 jobs per billion US dollar invested, which is one of the highest ratios among world regions. And the European Union accounts for about 27% of these jobs, and more than half are in manufacturing, notably in sectors such as motor vehicles. Digital and renewables, although they are different in nature, are both boosting job creation. And we see that digital sectors are already accounting for around 20% of total FDI-related jobs, and they are driven particularly by US and EU investments in digital services. Jobs in renewable energy remain a smaller share of the total, around 3%, but they have almost doubled over the period between the decade 2003-2013 to the decade 2014 to 2024. And they are indeed critical for building a low-carbon economy. Beyond the number of jobs created, FDI has also had a positive impact on job quality. And we see that foreign firms in LAC generally offer higher wages and more stable contracts than domestic firms. However, the gender outcomes are mixed. Foreign firms tend to have higher shares of women in overall employment, but they are not more likely to have women in management and leadership positions. And FDI continues to be concentrated in male-dominated sectors. EU investment, in particular, is often directed towards sectors that provide better quality jobs. So sectors with higher wages, with lower informality, and a more educated workforce. And these results indicate that EU FDI is playing an important role in supporting more formal and inclusive labor markets in the region. The report also highlights that several EU firms operating in LAC, such as Telefónica, Santander, Siemens, and Volkswagen, actively contribute to improving job quality through a range of initiatives carried out in collaboration with local partners that promote skills development, including digital skills, inclusion, and diversity. And country case studies in the report also underline the role of the EU, both as a source of FDI in skills training and education, and as a provider of complementary official development assistance concentrated in vocational training, both helping to address skills mismatches in the region. So the significant socio-economic impact generated by FDI in the region, and particularly by EU investment over the past 2 decades, demonstrate the value of a deeper partnership, one that brings together investment, trade, and development cooperation, and that is reinforced by the Global Gateway's 360-degree approach. Let me share 4 policy considerations emerging from the report based on our OECD standards on FDI qualities on sustainable development. First, countries need stronger governance and policy coherence for investment, and this means clearly articulating national development and industrial strategies, ensuring that investment, trade, innovation, skills, and climate policies pull all in the same direction, and establishing effective coordination between ministries, agencies, and different levels of government. The second policy consideration is that improving the business environment and regulatory framework is essential, and investors value stability, they value predictability and transparency, while societies themselves expect investments to meet high environmental, social, and governance standards. So sound regulations and efficient institutions are key to attract and retain quality FDI. Third, the EU should continue collaborating with partners from the Community of Latin America and Caribbean States, CELAC, to support further efforts to enhance the development impact of FDI. This includes using targeted investment promotion and facilitation, as well as technical and financial support to attract and retain quality investments, particularly those that support economic diversification, with technological upgrading, promote skills development, and foster inclusion and gender equality. And finally, development cooperation can further help by de-risking investments by supporting project preparation, by strengthening institutions, promoting training and skills, and sharing best practices on responsible business conduct. So initiatives like the EU Global Gateway that was so often mentioned today can play an important role in this respect. So just to say, the English version is available online. The Spanish version will be published by the end of the year, and we really hope that this work can help further the discussion on Latin America and the Caribbean's next phase of growth through quality FDI, and of course we stand ready to help all the partners from the European Commission from the European Union countries to LAC countries in really understanding what are the impacts, what are the policy solutions to improve the positive contribution of FDI to sustainable development. Thank you very much.
Antonio, yo creo que así.
I think the report will give us more opportunities to verify that EU investments in Latin America are contributing to something that is evident. It is one of the greatest problems in Latin America, which is their low productivity growth, the enormous difficulty that Latin America has, mostly because the investments were directed to the extraction sector or to the primary sector, and there was a lack of culture of investment with a focus in technology and education and training, and even to focus on governance and regulatory frameworks for industry development in Latin America. In any case, the figure of low productivity growth, without a doubt, is one of the most negative elements that is characteristic of Latin America in general, without getting into details of each country, because we know that they are very different among themselves. I would like to thank Raga, Antonio, and the OECD, but I'm also here to give you bad news. Unfortunately, we had planned on finishing this seminar with one more talk between Mr. Salafranca, myself, and Josep Borrell, but he has been calling us because he came back from Geneva at 3 o'clock, but he injured himself. It is not a serious injury, but he has had to go to the hospital and he cannot come. So I was keeping an eye on my phone to see if he could come. Finally, we have finished our session or our event half an hour late, which was almost positive because we could have waited for him a little bit longer. But unfortunately, he is in hospital, he cannot come, and we have to finish the seminar here and now. However, we would like to invite you for a cocktail. We would like to thank you with a toast for coming here and being with us this afternoon. Thank you so much.